The alien king offered him riches. Those words echoed in Daniel's mind as he stood inside the great court of the Keshar Empire. The chamber was unlike anything a human had ever seen. Massive pillars carved from a single piece of black stone reached up so high they disappeared into the shadows above. Light came from strange blue flames that floated in the air, casting ghostly reflections on the polished floor. Around him, alien nobles sat in curved rows, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Daniel Cross had never been this far from home. He had spent years working on deep space transport ships, hauling goods between frontier worlds. He wasn't a soldier, not officially, but trouble had a way of finding him. And trouble had found him again, this time in the form of a half-dead alien prince drifting in the wreck of a burning starship. Daniel had pulled him out of the wreckage when no one else dared. Now, the king himself had called Daniel here too. Reward him. The alien king was huge, twice the height of a man, broad-shouldered, wearing dark armor decorated with silver patterns that shifted like living metal. His eyes were like molten gold, bright and unblinking. His voice was deep enough to make the air tremble. "You have saved the blood of my blood," the king said. "In the name of Keshar, I grant you one request. Ask for anything, and it will be yours." The court fell silent. All eyes turned to Daniel. He could feel the weight of their stares, the quiet judgment. It had been a long time since Daniel felt this out of place. Years ago, before his life among the stars, there had been someone he cared about deeply. Her name was Mara, and she had been his closest friend since childhood. They'd spent endless nights talking, laughing, sharing dreams of exploring the galaxy. Then one day she left for another world, a new job, a better life. He had stayed behind. At first they wrote messages to each other, long letters full of stories. But the messages became shorter, then slower, then stopped. It had been years since he'd heard her voice. He missed her every day. And now, standing before this alien throne, he felt that same old ache, that sense of distance, that feeling that once someone drifts too far away, you may never reach them again. The king gestured, and servants rolled forward massive chests of treasure. The lid swung open to reveal mountains of glittering jewels, gold coins, and bars of rare metals. They brought out rolls of ancient star maps, each leading to planets rich with resources. The king's voice rumbled again. "Take your reward, human." Daniel looked at the treasure, but his eyes drifted past it. Across the court, half hidden in the shadows, he saw her. The figure was tall, armored, and motionless. Her armor was dark, like the king's, but edged with crimson. Her helmet was tucked under one arm, revealing a face marked by old battle scars. Her eyes were sharp and cold, fixed on him with quiet challenge. Even without an introduction, he knew who she was, Princess Karenna, the fiercest daughter of the Keshar Empire. The Blade of K single quotes SHAR. He had heard stories about her. She had led fleets into battle, crushed rebellions, and stood unbroken against enemies twice her size. They said she had no interest in politics, no patience for diplomacy, and no kindness for strangers. Yet Daniel saw something else beneath that hard expression, something he couldn't name, but recognized. A distance. A wall. The same kind of wall he had built around himself after Mara left. He remembered what it was like to watch someone important drift away, and to feel powerless to stop it. He thought of all the treasure in the world, and how none of it could bring back the one person he had lost. And in that moment, he knew what he wanted. He stepped forward. The nobles leaned closer. The king's golden eyes narrowed. "I don't want gold," Daniel said. "I don't want land or ships." The silence deepened. "I want your fiercest daughter." Gasps filled the court. Several nobles stood, their voices rising in disbelief. Even Karena's eyes widened slightly. The king's voice boomed. "You would claim the blade of Keshar? You would take her from my house?" Daniel stood his ground. "I don't want to take her from anywhere. I want to stand beside her, not as a prize, but as an ally." The court erupted into shouts, but the king raised his hand, and the noise fell away. He studied Daniel for a long moment. "You are bold, human," the king said slowly. "Boldness is rare and dangerous." He leaned forward in his throne. "If you wish for such a bond, you will face trials. Survive them, and we will speak again." Daniel nodded once. "I'll face them." As the guards led him from the court, he glanced back at Karena. She was still watching him, her expression unreadable. He thought again of Mara, of the friendship that had faded into silence, of the miles and years between them. He didn't know if he could have bridged that gap, but maybe here, in this strange court, he had a chance to do it differently. He didn't want to watch someone drift away again. Not this time. The alien king had offered him riches. Instead, the human asked for his fiercest daughter. Daniel didn't. Sleep that night. He sat in the small guest chamber the palace had given him, staring out at the alien city below. The buildings curved like waves of black stone, lit with blue lights that shimmered in the dark. The air was thin and cold, but Daniel barely noticed. His mind was far away. It had been years since Mara left, but the ache of losing her friendship never faded. Back then, he thought there would be time to reach out. He told himself he'd send a message tomorrow, or the next day, or next week. But weeks became months, then years. And now, here he was, about to face trials for the right to stand beside someone he barely knew. Someone who might despise him. Someone who might not even want him there. Why was he doing this? The answer came easily. Because he didn't want history to repeat itself. He didn't want to stand on the sidelines while another connection slipped away. Even if Karena never accepted him, even if she wanted nothing to do with him, at least he would have tried. The next morning, the palace guards came for him. They led him back to the throne room. The alien king sat on his high seat, surrounded by his nobles. Beside him now stood Karena, her armor polished to a dark shine, her crimson edges glowing faintly. She didn't look at Daniel. Human. The king began, "You have refused riches. You have refused power. Instead, you have asked for something far more dangerous. To stand beside the blade of Keshar is no small thing. If you wish this, you will prove your worth." He gestured, and the servants brought forward more treasures mountains of gold coins, chests of glowing crystals, rare technology from across the galaxy. "This is your last chance to take the easy path," the king said. "Choose now. Take your reward and leave in peace, or face the trials." Daniel stepped forward slowly. His eyes moved over the treasure, the kind of wealth that could buy him a home anywhere in the galaxy. But that wasn't what he needed. He glanced toward Karena. For a brief moment, her eyes met his. They were sharp and cold, but there was something hidden there, something he couldn't name. He shook his head. "I told you before. I don't want treasure. I'm not here for gold." The king's golden eyes glowed brighter. "Then you face the trials," the court murmured. The nobles whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Some laughed softly, certain the human would fail. The king raised his hand. "The first trial begins tomorrow. You will face the beasts of the icy moons. Survive, and you may continue." The guards led Daniel away. That night, Daniel lay in his bed, but didn't close his eyes. He thought about what the king had said. He thought about Karena's expression. And he thought about Mara again. When Mara had moved away, she told him, "Don't let the distance change us," but it had. And he had let it. He remembered one time, months after she left, when he sat down to write her a message. He had written half of it, telling her about his work, about the people he'd met, and then he stopped. He didn't know what to say anymore. The words felt empty. So he deleted it. He had been afraid that too much time had passed, that she wouldn't answer, that maybe she had moved on. So he said nothing. And silence grew between them until it was a wall too high to climb. Here, in this alien palace, Daniel realized he was climbing that wall again. Not with Mara, but with Corinna. She wasn't his friend. She wasn't even an ally yet. But he could see the same distance in her that he once carried in himself. And he wasn't going to walk away this time. Morning came too soon. The guards took him to a great stone gate outside the city. Beyond it stretched an icy plain under a pale sun. The air was sharp and biting. From the far side of the plain, shapes began to emerge, massive beasts with thick white fur, claws like curved blades, and eyes that glowed red. They moved with a slow, deadly grace, circling him. Daniel's only weapon was a short spear the guards had given him. His breath froze in the air as he gripped it tighter. The first beast lunged. Daniel rolled aside, the claws missing him by inches. He struck with the spear, but it only cut shallowly through the thick fur. The beast roared and charged again. He fought hard, using every ounce of strength and skill he had. But it wasn't strength alone that kept him alive. It was patience, timing, and knowing when to move. Hours passed before the last beast fell. Retreating into the snow with a low growl. Daniel stood in the frozen wind, panting, his body aching from the fight. The guards brought him back to the palace. The king sat waiting. "You have survived the first trial," he said. "Few can claim that." Corinna was there again, standing silently beside the throne. This time, she looked at him for more than a fall. Daniel's arms still ached from the icy moon trial. His hands were raw from gripping the spear, and every movement sent a sharp pain through his shoulders. But he had survived. The palace healers patched him up, their strange silver ointment, numbing the pain. He lay on a low bed in his guest room, staring at the ceiling. Even now, after everything, his thoughts drifted back to Mara. When she left for another world, she had said, "You'll visit, right?" He'd promised he would. But promises were easy to make and hard to keep. The longer he stayed away, the heavier the silence grew. It was strange. He could cross half the galaxy to fight for someone he barely knew, but he couldn't cross one world to visit someone who had once been his best friend. That thought stung. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. One of the king's guards stepped inside. "The second trial begins," he said simply. Daniel followed the guard through winding palace halls until they came to the throne room again. The alien king sat on his high seat. Corinna stood beside him as before, her dark armor gleaming, her gaze sharp. She looked like she belonged to another world entirely, one Daniel would never truly understand. "The first trial proved your body strong," the king said. "The second will test your mind." He waved a hand, and the great doors at the side of the court opened. Beyond them stretched a dark corridor, carved into the rock itself. "This is the labyrinth of stone," the king said. "Many who enter never return. Find the heart of the maze and bring back the silver flame. Do this, and you will have passed the second trial." Daniel nodded, understood. As he stepped toward the doors, he caught a glimpse of Corinna. For the first time, she spoke to him. "Do not trust what you see," she said. "The labyrinth will use your own thoughts against you." Her voice was low, steady, and carried the weight of someone who had been there before. Daniel wanted to thank her, but she had already looked away. The labyrinth was colder than the palace halls. The air was still and heavy. His footsteps echoed off the walls, each one sounding louder than the last. The passages twisted and turned, without reason. Some ended in walls, others in open chambers, where the shadows seemed too deep. At first, Daniel kept his mind sharp, counting his steps, marking the turns with scratches on the wall. But as the hours passed, the air seemed thicker, and the silence seemed to press on him. Then he began to hear things, a faint voice calling his name. He froze. Daniel. The voice was soft, familiar. Mara. He turned sharply, but there was only empty hallway. The sound came again, closer this time. Daniel, why didn't you write? His chest tightened. He knew it wasn't real. Karenna had warned him. But the voice pulled at something deep inside him, something he had buried for years. He remembered the last time he had seen Mara, standing on the launch platform before her transport left. She had smiled, but her eyes had been sad. "Don't disappear," she had said. And he had. He forced himself to keep walking. The voice followed him, weaving through the corridors, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp with disappointment. "You forgot. You could have come. You didn't try." Daniel clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. He knew the labyrinth was trying to break him, but it was using the truth to do it. He took a deep breath. "I didn't forget you, Mara," he said into the dark. "I was just afraid it had been too long. Afraid you didn't care anymore." His voice shook, but he kept going. "But I care. I always have." The voice faded. He walked on, and for the first time since entering the labyrinth, the air felt lighter. Hours later, he found a wide chamber deep in the maze. At its center was a stone pedestal, and on it burned a flame that glowed silver white. It was not fire as he knew it. It did not flicker, but pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Daniel stepped forward and reached out. A moment his fingers touched. The flame, warmth spread through him, not just in his body, but in his chest, where the ache had lived for so long. He took the flame in a small silver vessel and began the long walk back. This time, the corridors felt shorter, the shadows less heavy. When he emerged into the throne room, the court gasped. Few had expected him to return. The king's eyes glimmered with interest. "You have brought the silver flame," the king said. "You have passed the second trial." Daniel placed the vessel before the throne. He was tired, covered in dust, but he stood straight. Karenna stepped forward, her gaze locked on him. "The labyrinth shows a warrior's greatest weakness," she said. "Many are destroyed by it. You are still standing." Daniel met her eyes. "I've been running from things for a long time," he said quietly. "I think I'm done running." Something flickered in her expression. Not warmth. Not yet, but recognition. The king's voice boomed. "One trial remains. Survive it, and your request will be considered." As Daniel was led away, he felt the weight of distance between himself and Karenna. But like with the icy moon trial, that distance felt just a little smaller now. And deep down, he began to think. Maybe the same could be true for Mara. Maybe it wasn't too late. The palace bells rang at dawn. Their deep sound rolled through the air like distant thunder. Daniel woke instantly, heart already beating faster. This was the third and final trial. He had survived the beasts of the icy moon. He had faced the illusions in the labyrinth of stone. Now, whatever came next would decide everything. The guards came for him, silent as always, leading him through the winding halls until he stepped into the throne room. The alien king sat tall, the golden fire in his eyes glowing brighter than before. Beside him stood Karenna, her armor polished, her crimson edges catching the light. Daniel noticed she held her helmet in one hand, her expression unreadable. "The first trial tested your strength," the king said. "The second tested your mind. The third will test your heart." Daniel waited, wondering what that meant. The king rose from his throne. His shadow fell across the court as he spoke. Your final trial is not against beast or trap. It is against Karenna, my daughter. Defeat her, and your request will be granted." Gasps rippled through the court. Daniel froze. He had expected danger, but to fight her? That was something else entirely. Karenna stepped forward, pulling her helmet over her head. "I will not go easy," she said simply. Daniel nodded. "I wouldn't want you to." The trial ground was a vast stone arena open to the pale sky. Around them, alien nobles filled the seats, their voices a low hum of anticipation. Daniel stood on one side, holding a training blade the guards had given him. Karenna stood on the other, her stance balanced and steady, her long crimson-edged sword in hand. A horn sounded, and she moved. She was faster than anything he'd faced before. Her first strike nearly knocked the sword from his hand. He blocked, barely, the impact running up his arms. She pressed forward, blow after blow, her movements precise and controlled. Daniel dodged, blocked, and sidestepped. But every time he thought he found an opening, she closed it in an instant. This wasn't just a fight. It was a test of patience, of endurance, of knowing when to act. As they moved, Daniel's mind kept drifting unexpectedly, not to Karenna, but to Mara. He remembered a night long ago, before she left. They had been sitting by the river near his home, watching the stars. She had told him she wanted to explore, to see other worlds. He had laughed, saying he was fine where he was. And then she had said something he hadn't forgotten. "Distance isn't just space, Daniel. It's silence." Back then, he hadn't understood what she meant. Now he did, because here he was, fighting. With everything he had, yet still feeling there was a wall between him and Karenna, just like there had been between him and Mara. Karenna's blade struck his shoulder, knocking him back a step. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. "You're holding back," she said. Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm thinking." She tilted her head, just slightly. "Thinking doesn't win battles." "Sometimes it does," he said, shifting his grip. The next time she attacked, he didn't try to overpower her. He moved with her strikes, matching her rhythm instead of breaking it. Slowly, their movements began to flow together, the clash of blades turning into something closer to a dance. She seemed to notice. Her strikes grew sharper, more deliberate, but her eyes behind the visor stayed on him. Finally, after what felt like hours, she stepped back, her sword lowered. "You're not trying to beat me," she said. Daniel took a deep breath. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to stand with you." For a long moment, she said nothing. The crowd was silent too. Then she removed her helmet, her eyes fixed on his. "You fight like someone who has lost before," she said quietly. Daniel's chest tightened. "I have, and you don't want to lose again." "No," he said. "Not if I can help it." The horn sounded again, ending the trial. They stood in the center of the arena as the alien king rose from his seat. "The duel is done," he said. "You have faced my daughter and stood your ground. More, you have earned her respect." The crowd murmured at that. Karenna gave the smallest nod in Daniel's direction. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet, but it was something. As they left the arena, Daniel felt the distance between them shrink just a little more. And for the first time in years, the thought came to him clearly. If he could bridge this gap with Karenna, maybe he could do the same with Mara. Maybe distance didn't have to last forever. The day after the duel, Daniel expected to be sent home or left to wait in the palace. Instead, the alien king summoned him to the war hall. The room was vast, its walls covered in star maps. Tall windows looked out over the alien city, and in the center stood a long table where Karenna was already studying a map projected in blue light. When Daniel entered, she looked up briefly. "You're late," she said. Daniel frowned. I wasn't told we had a meeting. Her expression didn't change. Then you should have been early. He almost smiled, almost. All right, what's the task? She gestured to the map. A convoy of supply ships was attacked near the border. Survivors are stranded on a small moon. We're going to bring them back. Daniel blinked. We? Corinna gave a short nod. You passed the trials. Now you prove it wasn't luck. They left the palace in a small attack craft, the silver hull gleaming under the pale sun. Corinna piloted with practiced ease, her hands steady on the controls. Daniel sat beside her, watching the city fall away below them. It was quiet for a while, the hum of the engines filling the space between them. Finally, Daniel said, Back in the arena. You were right. Corinna glanced at him. About what? I have lost before? He looked out at the stars. Someone I cared about moved away. I thought we'd stay close. We didn't. I let the distance win. She didn't answer right away. Distance is dangerous, she said at last. It can turn allies into strangers. Daniel nodded. That's why I'm here. I don't want that to happen again. This time, she didn't look away. We'll see if you mean that. The moon where the survivors waited was little more than a frozen rock. Their craft descended through thin clouds and landed on the jagged surface. The moment they stepped out, the wind cut through them like blades. The sun hung low, casting long shadows over the ice. They found the wreck of the convoy ships half buried in snow. Fires still burned weakly inside the broken hulls. Daniel and Corinna moved fast, searching for survivors. Daniel pulled 2 alien crew members from a collapsed corridor, wrapping them in thermal blankets. You're safe now, he said low. They didn't understand his words. The look in their eyes told him it didn't matter. They understood enough. Corinna returned with 3 more survivors, her armor dusted with frost. We have to move, she said. The attackers may still be nearby. They formed a tight group, guiding the survivors toward the ship. Daniel took the lead, Corinna guarding the rear. Halfway back, shapes appeared on the horizon. Raiders on fast hover skiffs, their weapons glinting in the pale light. Daniel cursed under his breath. We can't outrun them. Corinna drew her sword. Then we don't. The raiders closed in quickly. Daniel set the survivors behind a ridge for cover, then took his position beside Corinna. The first skiff roared past, firing bursts of plasma. Daniel ducked behind a rock, then popped up and fired back with a scavenged rifle. His shot hit the engine, sending the skiff spiraling into the snow. Corinna leaped into the path of the second skiff, her blade slicing through its steering fins. It crashed in a shower of ice and sparks. The remaining raiders hesitated, circling. Warily, Daniel and Corinna stood shoulder to shoulder, their breaths clouding the air. On my mark, Corinna said quietly. Ready, Daniel replied. She moved first, charging toward the nearest skiff. Daniel followed, covering her with rifle fire. Between them, they took down the last of the raiders in minutes. When it was over, they stood together in the silent snow, their breath heavy but steady. Back aboard the craft, the survivors huddled. In the rear cabin, wrapped in blankets, Corinna piloted them back toward the city, her expression calm but her eyes focused. Daniel sat beside her, his voice low. That felt different. How? She asked. Like we weren't just fighting together, like we were watching each other's backs. She glanced at him. That's what all eyes do. Daniel smiled faintly. Yeah, it's been a while. When? They landed at the palace. The alien king was waiting. He looked over the rescued crew, then at Daniel and Corinna. You worked well together, he said. Perhaps you are not as different as I thought. Corinna didn't answer, but she didn't look away from Daniel either. As Daniel walked back to his quarters, the thought came to him again, clearer this time. If he could stand beside Corinna now, after all the trials, maybe he could. Reach Mara again. Two dot. Maybe it wasn't too late to send that message. Maybe the distance could still be crossed. Asterisk, the palace was quieter at night. Most of the guards had taken their posts along the outer walls, and the streets outside glowed faintly under silver lamps. Daniel sat at the small desk in his quarters, the room lit only by the dim blue light of the communicator. He stared at the blank message screen for a long time. His hands rested on the keys, but no words came. Mara was light years away now. He didn't even know if the message would reach her quickly, or if she'd even want to read it. Still, the thought of not trying felt worse than the risk of silence. He began typing. Hey, Mara. He stopped. A blinking cursor felt like it was watching him. A knock at the door made him sit up quickly. Come in, he said. Corinna stepped inside, her armor replaced by dark travel clothes. We have a mission, she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Now? It's the middle of the night. She handed him a small device. Our scouts found a signal from a human vessel yours. It's been drifting near the trade routes. If it's still intact, it could have data. Or people. Daniel felt his chest tighten. A human ship? Corinna nodded. The king ordered us to investigate. We leave in 1 hour. The journey through space was silent at first. Corinna kept her eyes on the controls, the stars sliding past like streaks of silver. Daniel sat beside her, thinking about the message she hadn't finished. He finally broke the quiet. If it is a human ship, it might have news from Earth. Corinna gave a short nod. Would that make you happy? Daniel looked down. It depends. Sometimes hearing from home is harder than silence. You remember what you've lost. She glanced at him. And sometimes you remember why you fight. After hours of travel, the ship came into view dark, silent and spinning slowly. The hull bore the faded insignia of an old human exploration vessel. They docked carefully. The airlock hissed, and they stepped inside, their helmets sealing against the stale air. The corridors were dim, lit only by emergency lights. Dust floated in the low gravity. They found no crew, only abandoned cabins, overturned chairs, and scattered personal items. Daniel picked up a photo lying on the floor. It showed a smiling group of humans, their arms around each other. He felt a lump in his throat. They looked so alive. In the ship's main control room, Corinna began scanning the logs. Daniel moved to a small console in the corner, its surface still faintly glowing. He tapped the screen. To his surprise, the system recognized him as human and opened a stored folder. Inside were dozens of unsent messages, each addressed to people. Back on Earth, one file caught his eye. It was labeled Mara. His fingers froze over the controls. He opened it slowly. The message was from a crew member named Owen, talking about how Mara had joined a research team far from home. She was happy, but missed her old friends. Daniel read it twice, his pulse quickening. She still thought about the past. She still remembered. Daniel, Corinna called from across the room. I found a working data core. It can be removed and taken to the palace for study. He nodded, closing the file. Good. Let's get it out of here. They secured the core and made their way back through the empty corridors. As they left, Daniel glanced one last time at the photo he'd found. This time, he didn't just see what was gone. He saw what was worth fighting for. Back aboard their craft, Corinna set a course for the city. The hum of the engines filled the quiet again. You found something, she said without looking at him. Daniel hesitated. Yeah, a message about someone I knew. She's still out there. Corinna's eyes flicked toward him briefly. Then you know your path. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She kept her gaze on the stars. You humans always talk about impossible odds, but you move anyway. You reach farther than the rest of us. That's why the king lets you stay. That's why I believe you can cross your distance." When they landed at the palace, Daniel didn't return to his quarters right away. Instead, he went straight to the communications wing. The screen lit his face in pale light. His hands no longer hesitated over the keys. "Hey, Mara, I know it's been a long time. I don't even know if you'll get this soon. But I wanted to tell you I'm still here. I'm still me. And I'd like to hear from you again." He read it once, then sent it. The message streaked out into the stars, carrying with it not just his words, but the thing that had been missing since she left Hope.